All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. My name is Alex. I'm with The Scholar. Thank you for joining us this evening. We hope you enjoyed tonight's program with New York Times bestselling author Chuck Klosterman and the host of The Rights to Ricky Sanchez and the 94 WIP afternoon show, Spike Eskin. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Some of you have a copy of Football in your hands. We will be holding a personalization and signing line next door in our Rare Books building immediately after the talk with Chuck. We encourage you to join the signing line if you'd like, and we also have copies of a few of Chuck's other books at the cafe for sale, so we encourage you to come away with a couple more books this evening. At this time, I have the honor of introducing our speakers this evening. Our interviewer is Spike Eskin. Spike is the host of the WIP afternoon show with Ike Reese and Jack Fritz, airing from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. in Philadelphia on 94 WIP, and the host of The Rights to Ricky Sanchez, the longest-running Philadelphia 76ers podcast. The WIP Afternoon Show is the highest-rated radio show in Philadelphia in its time period, and The Rights to Ricky Sanchez, which has been ingrained in Sixers fan culture since 2013, is iconic within team-centric sports podcasting. Spike was previously the VP of programming for WFAN in New York and CBS Sports Radio, as well as program director of 94 WIP. Spike lives in South Jersey with his wife Valerie and dogs Rebel and Scotchy. A huge thank you to Spike for joining us in Harrisburg this evening. Spike came from Philly to help out for this event, so can we just quickly give him a round of applause? Thanks, Spike. Of course, our featured author is Chuck Klosterman. Chuck is the best-selling author of 9 nonfiction books, including Football, X, The 90s, Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs, and But What If We're Wrong? 2 novels, Downtown Al and The Visible Man, and the short story collection Raised in Captivity. He has written for The New York Times, The Washington Post, GQ, Esquire, Spin, The Guardian, The Believer, and ESPN. Klosterman served as the ethicist for The New York Times Magazine for 3 years and was an original founder of the website Grantland with Bill Simmons. He was raised in rural North Dakota and now lives in Portland, Oregon. Of course, tonight we're here to discuss Chuck's aptly titled new book, Football. Publishers Weekly calls the book a transcendent appraisal of America's favorite sport, and Tyler Cohen asks, could this be the best book on football ever? It's an honor to welcome Chuck and Spike to the Midtown Scholar Bookstore this evening, so without further ado, please join me in giving them a warm Harrisburg welcome.
This is so intimidating. Do you get nervous doing this in front of people?
Well, you got to be a little bit nervous. If you're not a little bit nervous, you come out flat.
Yeah.
But I have to. It's the setting maybe brings out the best of me. Maybe I'm like Jordan. I only feel comfortable in the arena, on the court. And that's everywhere else I'm uncomfortable. But here I'm myself.
What is your favorite thing about doing these, and what is your least favorite thing?
My favorite thing about doing these is very easy to answer, which is the questions from the audience. And there will be a question and answer period. And when that comes up, you may feel obligated to ask me about this book or maybe about football. You don't have to. You can ask me anything you want. I don't care if old books, things I haven't written at all. Greenland. It doesn't matter what it is. Okay, that's my favorite part. My least favorite part, the honest answer is I miss my kids and my wife when I do this. I am. But then also sometimes it's sitting around the airport. I'm just tall enough where flying is painful sometimes. So that, I guess. But I enjoy this. I do. I always think it's fun to do this. This is part of being a writer that I enjoy.
There's a lot of bands nowadays, like this album is 10 years old, they do a tour and they play that album. If you could do one of these for one of the books that you've previously written to talk about again, what would it be? If you could tour on an old book.
Well, this summer they're re-releasing Fargo Rock City for the 25th anniversary, but that's not really the answer because in some ways the person who wrote that book I have no relationship to anymore. It is I would feel really uncomfortable, I think, even reading many of the parts of that book. That book, But What If We're Wrong, I thought was, that worked. And I think that's something you can kind of talk about forever, in a way. A lot of the early books, I will admit, I feel weird about them now. I mean, I did things without really thinking. like I have that. My third book is about like going around the country, going to where like various rock musicians have died, but I'm really talking about these 3 women that I had relationships with. And I think at the time I was like, it would be interesting if someone did that about me. I would be interested to see what their interior world was about our relationship. Turns out not everyone feels that way. And it's kind of idiotic. I had to write a book to figure this out, that maybe they would feel strange about me sort of using them as a plot device in a book of it. So that, I don't know. I mean, I guess I've never thought of like doing a reunion tour of myself.
Yeah. Well, so normally I would have listened to every podcast that you were on talking about this book, but I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to hear a question that was good that I might have asked anyway and then not ask you. But then might ask you questions that you've been asked before already. But I figure they would be questions that people would want to hear.
And most of those podcasts are coming out tomorrow.
Okay,
so this will be the
then.
first time that they hear these things.
They're good. I purposely stayed. I saw you were on Simmons. I was like, I'm not listening to it. I'll
you
wait
didn't
till
listen to that one.
I did not.
Okay. That was a long one, but yes.
Yeah, well. Mm-hmm. So this is something that I'm sure you've been asked before, or maybe not in this way. So you sort of start the book and end the book with the idea that football in 30 years will not be what it is today. And you will read it, you give a good explanation as to how and why. My question would be, what was football before football? In that, was there something that held America the way that football holds America? And then to go back to, but what if we're wrong? If you were to think ahead about what would be football after football, what would it be?
Okay, first of all, this idea sort of football possibly not maybe disappearing entirely, but receding from the culture. 30 years would be kind of the earliest point. I would even go a little further. I would say 2 generations. I feel like there's still got to be, it's less about the number of years and about the idea of, young people now then having their own kids, like 2 generations removed, when I kind of foresee this happening. What was football before? Football starts after the Civil War, and it is, it seems weird sometimes to say this out loud, but the consensus belief is that the Civil War ended, and there were a lot of people who were like, we won't have wars anymore. How will our young men face adversity? Like, it's going to hurt our society because our men will be soft. They will not have conflict. They will not see their friends die. How will they, it'll be bad for the Republic. We need a surrogate. Let's create a simulation. And that's how football gets created. Then it kind of evolves, as it does for 60 or 70 or 80 years, intersects with the rise of television in 1950, and that's kind of what the phenomenon we understand now happens. I mean, it really is that marriage of football and television. Now, the second part of your question is more complicated. So 100 years ago, the 3 biggest sports in America were baseball, boxing, and horse racing. Football now is bigger than all 3 of those things were even in 1920. Football now has an outsized importance that everyone understands, but is still to some degree underrated. I mean, like the fact that like in 2023, of the 100 most watched television broadcasts in America, 93 were NFL games, and then 3 or 4 were college games. There's no comparison to that. So not only is football really the last kind of vestige of the monoculture, I guess, along with Taylor Swift, those 2, I mean, that's really the 2 things, I don't think it's possible for something to have that kind of monocultural dominance after football. Like if what I say about football happens, what that means is that there is no monoculture. Like there is nothing that is that sort of is so like such a large object that besides being incredibly popular, it even sort of informs the life of people who don't care at all, which in some ways football does at this point. I mean, it's I think it's like one thing that was kind of accidentally insightful about the TV show Friday Night Lights was that, in the first episode, the Jesse Plemons character is introduced as somebody who's in this town in Texas where football is everything, and he hates football. He wants to be like a death metal band or whatever. But still, his whole reality is shaped by that. And then as the seasons go on, eventually they even have to have him join the team. Because it's which I don't think was any kind of conscious decision about showing that like he couldn't resist the gravity of it. It was almost like accidentally metaphorical, that even this person who's in your show to represent people who don't like this thing eventually becomes the kicker, you know?
Yeah.
Of course, he also murders a guy in the second season, but that's like a, you know.
So my job is we talk about football 4 hours a day for a sports radio show, and I didn't realize till I started doing it how little I actually understood football until I started digging in and had to think about it. So how much of that? How many people do you think have that experience with football? Because I think you do something really interesting where you talk about how complicated even getting one play in is. You don't really think about it as you're watching it. So how many people don't even think about what they're watching while they're watching it, do you think?
Well, I mean, it's one of the many paradoxes to the dominance of football, the fact that it is by far the most complicated team sport we have, in a way that if you try to watch a game with someone who has never experienced it, it is almost even impossible to explain to them what they're seeing, or like if I'm watching it with my son or whatever, and he's a little guy, like he could literally ask a question after every play. So it's strange that something that complicated would be that popular, especially kind of with the stereotype of what America's supposed to be like, right? Like people in Europe have a pretty pejorative view of the intellect of Americans. It's surprising maybe to them that this hyper complicated thing is the thing people love the most. But what is also sort of, I hate to use this word, but almost kind of magical about football is that particularly the televised experience weirdly equalizes the playing field for all consumers. Say if you're watching the game and also with a college offensive coordinator and some casual fan, the way the game is presented allows you to have a strangely neutral experience that is shared. I mean, there's things about football that should be a huge problem that is not. We typically watch football almost exclusively from the same television angle, right? It's like midfield, down, you know, we're seeing it from, that's moving horizontally across the field. You can't even see every guy. You can't see the free safety. There's often a moment where a quarterback will throw the ball deep, and there will be like a split moment where you don't know if the guy's open or covered or he's throwing the ball away. There's like this weird sort of creative tension in your mind, like an intellectual tension that no one seems to know what's going to happen, even if they're an expert. There are 22 guys moving at the same time. It's intense and violence and all of these things. And that almost overemphasis of complexity ends up having a weird reversal, where it's so complicated that no one can understand it. Therefore, we're all sharing in the same experience. And I think that's a real key to it. I mean, one thing about this book that is, you know, I guess you're already at the bookstore, so you're probably going to buy it, so I can say this to you. I'm always a little nervous to say this, that a big part of this book has to do with semiotics. Like the way things happen, the message, and then the received message by the audience. And if you say, oh, this is a football book about semiotics, it doesn't really excite the average football fan. But in a weird way, everything is semiotics. Everything, you know, any kind of sport or any kind of art, any kind of perception you have about politics or reality, it's all about that sort of transfer of what the thing is and how you kind of get it into your mind. And football is accidentally ideal for this, especially as a television product.
Well, the chapter about television, I hadn't really thought about till I read it, because there's something like 11 minutes of football in an actual football game.
If you watch a football game at 3 hour television, on average, yes, there's 11 minutes of action in 3 hours. So which seems like if you were pitching that as a new idea, like I got this sport, okay, it's 3 hours long. Only I think they would be like, we can tweak that, like, you know, it's like.
But I didn't realize how much football had trained me on the other sports in how good it is for football until I'm watching basketball and I realize I don't have a chance to look away, which I do for football because I have 20 seconds in between each one and it's not always happening. And it actually has made it harder for me, the more football I've watched, to watch basketball, because I go and I realize I've missed 2 minutes of the game and I have to go back and watch and see what I've missed.
Well, you know, and it's even a more that you can't look away, you can't mentally break from it. I mean, okay, so I kind of see televised sports, and there's three types, okay? The first type is sort of nonstop action, kind of hypnotic, mesmerizing sports. Either like basketball, soccer, combat sports, auto racing. The action is nonstop. Okay, it's up and down and up and down. The stakes of every possession are low because there's so many of them. Now the apex of those games, like the end of an incredible Final Four game or something, is incredible. But very often, even an NBA playoff game, it can be it can kind of feel like you're watching windshield wipers sometimes in the second quarter. Like it's hypnotic in a bad way. Okay, the second category are cerebral sports. These are like baseball, golf, I guess cricket. These are things where it's like there's very little action, but you watch a guy who's going to hit a golf ball, so you watch him for 60 seconds, picking up what club he's going to use, taking a few practice swings, looking up the fairway. He hits it, and it's 3 or 4 seconds. Then there's 90 seconds of discussion about where it went and what he'll do next and all these things. And that's actually the interesting part, because everything is actually prologue to what you think will maybe be this amazing end. It's like a mental thing where it's like you're not really seeing much action, but you're very involved with how the individual thinks about this. And then the third category is football, which is both of these things. Football is mostly a cerebral sport, kind of like golf. It's stopping constantly. It's one of the few team sports where the clock will run, while nothing is happening, Everything is rehearsed. Very few things happen spontaneously. And yet, because it's 22 people hitting each other in this super complex way, it's like, it feels like you're watching something dynamic. Like the intensity of the 5 or 6 seconds of a football play is sort of enough to give you the sensation of almost non-stop action. And then you have this period where you think about the play you saw, you think about the play you might see next, you think about the condition of the game now because it has changed, the down, the yardage, and you can also turn to your friend and talk about it. Or you can turn to your friend and talk about Iron Maiden. Or you can just look at your phone. Or you can drink. Or you can think about your job. And then get right back in. You can just completely re-engage. And I think that's part of the reason why, the reason I feel football is the greatest TV product ever created is not because of the greatest, the heights. The heights of television, whether it's the end of the World Series, a great episode of Succession, it's like the end of the 3rd season of Lost. TV at its greatest, the greatest moments, they're all good. But a bad football game is still watchable. I can still watch a game I have no interest in, and it's somehow a pleasurable experience, and that is the unique thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple friends who, at the end of every Sunday, there will be one great football game, and they'll be like, wow, the NFL did it again. How do they do it every time? And I was like, most of the games today sucked. I don't know what you're talking about, but they focus on that one that worked. Okay, so there's a chapter on race, and I found it strangely comforting that you were writing something that everything was not something I had thought in that way, but isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Do you find writing about that in a book is easier than doing it on any other platform?
Well, okay. It's the hardest. That was the hardest essay to write in the book. It is easier than any other platform, for sure.
Right.
Tweeting about race, not a great idea. Talking about it on a podcast is extremely dangerous because that part can be pulled out. Actually, the only 2 places that it's like live radio sometimes is okay because you it's. Unless you're talking about it for a long stretch of time, like sometimes it'll happen so quickly and people won't even know that this was like, but a book is the only place where you can really kind of outline your ideas in a way that is both accurate, provocative, but also in a way, I wouldn't say safe, but you can at least you can concede the things that sometimes you must concede. Like I really would not have preferred to write a chapter in this book about race. If I really could have not done that, I would have, but I would have known that you have to, right? This is like sports have a complicated racial component because of the nature of how society is in mass and how different it is in sports. And the idea particularly of like the black quarterback, that's like a meaningful thing in the history of football. So it had to be in there. I guess I'll just say that was the only chapter that I did ask my publisher. It's like, I need you to have some black people read this. Just because I don't want to be, I don't want something that I'm simply ignorant about to sort of destroy everything else. I feel like the ideas in that chapter are valid, but I don't want, I know at the same time that if you're flip about something, or if you simply don't have the life experience to really understand what you're saying, it's dangerous. So I mean, it's hard. Yeah.
Well, so one of my co-hosts is black. He played in the NFL, and if I criticize Jalen Hurts, there will inevitably be somebody that calls me a racist for doing it. And one of the good conversations I've had with him off air is like, he'll go, I know you're not racist, but let me explain to you why, coming from the other perspective, that is a sensitive thing. So I understand what you're saying. You could be saying everything that's right, but sometimes almost being perceived as it is the same as being it sometimes.
Well, it is the same.
Right. Yeah.
Because, like, I mean, outside, unless you're, like, committing a crime or whatever, the idea, the perception of racism and, like, the application of interpersonal racism, what's in your mind, what you say, there is no difference. I mean, it's like, if you change your language, if we're talking about this and for some reason we use, like a casually use some kind of racial epithet in this, it would have no impact on the world or this conversation. It would have a huge impact on how we would be perceived and how we think about the world, even though everything else is actually just like purely semantics, but the semantics matter.
So you tell a story about being at a Super Bowl party when the Giants beat the undefeated Patriots. And the final play, Tom Brady throws a Hail Mary, and it doesn't work, but somebody at the party says, why don't they just do that every time? And it made me think about basketball and how almost analytics-proof football is to an extent. There are numbers with football, but there's not enough plays for the analytics to really work. In that, to me, I hope this is a question and not just something I thought. I'm sorry. To me, shooting three-pointers was sort of like Tom Brady throwing a Hail Mary to Randy Moss every time. If you do it enough times, probably at the end of the day, you're going to win more football games than you lose. So you should but you shouldn't do it every time, because there's something in football that prevents the numbers from actually taking hold the way they have in basketball. And I found it interesting because I think there are things that they could do to optimize football, but the numbers don't work in the same way, and there's not enough games for it to even out over time, so they don't do it.
Well, the only way that's sort of happened really in football is the idea of going forward on fourth down, which is a radical change from the way like football was when I was growing up. And I mean, with basketball, like the three-point thing, I really changed, I think, the whole perception of analytics, because it was almost as if it wasn't almost as if this thing that was very obvious was ignored for a very long time. Like, these numbers might not be totally right, but I'm pretty sure in his second season, Larry Bird attempted 81 threes for the year. And like this is somebody who's considered, certainly from that period, the best year. Because the idea was you shot threes if you needed a three at the end of the game. That was really, any other time it was kind of seen as gratuitous. Somehow, and I say somehow like I'm talking about these people like I knew this, I grew up through this. Somehow the idea that you only had to shoot 33% on these is the same as shooting. It was a hard thing to accept because it went against the idea of how basketball had been coached for so long. And once that was realized, once it became very clear that you probably would be better off as a team only shooting threes as opposed to only shooting twos. Like every possession, and some colleges almost do this now, that kind of made them think, well, we got to rethink all these things. We might have been wrong about all these things. Baseball clearly made best for analytics, right? Because it's really, in a weird way, a team sport that's always an individual sport. And the Moneyball stuff was like, well, they had to change like the shift rule and everything, and it was so weird because I was like, why don't they just bunt here? And it's like, well, we just don't do that anymore, But football analytics is it is a little like even this going for fourth down stuff that happens all the time. Part of the reason I think the numbers indicated that there was such a value in doing that is because in the past it was only done in two situations. you had no choice, or you clearly felt you had an advantage. It was 4th and 1, and you had a better offensive tackle and a guard than the defense. So then the numbers really indicated the value. I would not be surprised at all if in 10 years there is suddenly an analytical swing in football where it's like punting is actually a winning, like a winning decision, because it's just that's the trouble with statistics in general. Statistics can only tell us about the past. Yet we think of them as predictive tools, but all they can do is show what has already happened. And but it's like you don't have anything better, so we're going to use this.
Well, I think it might be going backwards now a little bit, because the only way that it works, if you're following the numbers, you have to follow the numbers all the time, or else it's not worth doing it at all.
Exactly.
And you have to go for it on 4th down every single time it tells you to, or the edge is not there. You don't do it 2 times because I don't know that anybody has the stomach for it. And to the other point, I just don't think there's enough games for it to eventually. 162 games is a lot different than 17.
Well, I mean, the Lions kind of play that way now. That Lions go, there are teams I think who've adopted this idea that we're going to go for it on 4th down in every situation that the statistics say that we should. It's a little interesting to me because it's a little bit like video game thinking. Because if you're playing a football video game.
Also, not to interrupt, even though I interrupted, you describing of how you played EA Sports College Football, just wait for it in the book. I was laughing out loud because I could imagine how infuriating that is to anyone.
I do. I have an infuriatingly conservative style of playing a video game. But in a video game, if your receiver is like on a scale of 1 to 100 is a 96, and the corner in the game is an 84, well, every time your guy is going to be fast. So it's like in life isn't really like that. Like it's just it is much more situational than that, But it wasn't that. I think it was how many? I mean, you might remember this exactly. I bet it was probably 15 years ago. There was a Sunday night game between the Patriots and the Broncos when Peyton Manning was playing for the Broncos, and Bill Belichick went for it on 4th and 2 from his own 25 when they were ahead by 4. And it failed, and then the Broncos scored, and he was kind of eviscerated for this. And that was seen as the most insane thing. I think there were people who was like, has he lost it? Has he lost his mind or whatever, And now that wouldn't be seen in that way. Now it would just be seen as somebody maybe who was too Catholic about the analytics. They had to do them. But so it could swing back,
You talk about sports betting in there a good bit, and you did make one point that I thought was really good, in that the conversation about it is almost better than the actual betting, and that it adds another level of conversation around football. But you do say that you expected at some point for there to be a huge controversial scandal. Doesn't it seem as though that is happening and nobody is even paying attention to it? In that we had the college basketball one come out the other day. We had the NBA thing has now happened twice. And I just wonder if, I thought the same thing, but I wonder if we found out that a head coach had money on a game and made a decision based on that money, my original thought would have been our trust in sports will be gone and football will be broken. Now I start to think everybody will go, yeah, I figured, and just sort of move about their day.
Well, what is interesting about the recent one in college basketball is it involves, I think, 24 teams or 28 teams. But when you look at all of the teams, none of them are national powers. They tend to be teams that are, it's not that they're all terrible programs and they're the worst programs, but they're definitely, they're not Kansas, they're not North Carolina and Duke and these things. And I suppose if you were trying to corrupt a sport, like if I'm a mafioso or whatever, a casino guy, and I want to corrupt a game, I'm going to look for a team that's not that meaningful, not really on television, somebody who maybe their team is expected to lose anyways, but I got to make sure now they lose by more than 9 or whatever, And because of that, it just kind of dawned on me, it's like, it's not going to create this, sensation, where people will lose their mind. They'll be like, oh, so Fordham was doing this or whatever, It's like if there was ever a situation, I think, where this happened with major programs, it might be a little different. Or like in the NBA, it was Terry Rozier's prop bets and stuff like that. I think a lot of people do accept it as like, well, okay, I mean, in a sense, this is a weird thing to say, but like, there was the scandal with the Blazers and like
Chauncey
with Chauncey Billups, and part of it had to do with this like illegal poker game, which in this information was crazy, but it's hard to feel sympathy for someone playing in an illegal poker game. It's like you're already gambling, and now you're doing it. It's like it's kind of buyer beware, and maybe that is how it. But maybe that informs all this gambling stuff. Maybe that like even like the Tim Donaghy stuff. Maybe that it was sort of this thinking. It's like, well, okay, I'm already gambling. I'm already trying to get something for nothing. That really is part of what gambling is. You're trying to get something for nothing. You're not playing. It's one thing if you're betting on yourself. If we're playing one-on-one and I put $100 on myself, that's one thing. But if these two people are playing and I put $100 on her, it's like I'm not doing anything. I'm hoping it works out. And I get it, So it's like you have maybe less. It's kind of a less sympathetic idiom,
Yeah. What do you think would have happened to football if Damar Hamlin died?
Well, that is a good question. He's talking about an incident that happened between the Bills and the Bengals a few years ago, where for 48 hours or 24, it looked like this guy had died on the field. Now, it is a complicated case, especially complicated because the reason he almost died was this incredibly obscure cardiac issue that he had to be hit right in the middle of the chest at the exact time, the exact moment he was at a certain part of his respiratory cycle, and that caused this incident to happen. And then he lived, okay? And then not only lived, but he came back. Because if he had died in that way, I do think it would have been a situation where people would have been like, yeah, well, this is like a guy having a stroke on the field or whatever. It's like the chances of it happening are so tiny, Now, if there is a situation where a player dies on the field from head trauma, where we see two guys hit each other and one guy goes down and he never gets back up and we're all watching it, say it happens in the Super Bowl or whatever, then this question becomes really complicated because it's got to be attached to the game. The thing with Hamlin was not really attached to the game. He happened to be playing a game when it happened that allowed him to get hit in the chest. If you're somebody who's like kind of, thinks about this, what you really have to sort of visualize is someone dying in an event that is inescapable from the existence of the sport. This is why micro-concussions, the idea of micro-concussions is like sort of the one, I think, super kind of terrifying aspect of this. If it turns out that every time people collide at the line of scrimmage, they are receiving a small minor concussion, and these are going to compile over time. Well, then it's like, well, it can't be football without this, right? We'll have to accept that everyone's going to get CTE or whatever, and that's when it would get strange. But I do suspect in some ways that if it happened right now, it would decrease the number of kids playing football at the lowest level, but I think that the NFL would definitely try to push through.
Yeah, I think so as well. So you write something toward the end of the book about Mitch Hedberg, a comedian who you enjoyed even when he wasn't being funny, because, and I'm paraphrasing, but you said that he sort of said things that you think in a way that you wish you had said or something to that.
Sometimes it feels like things I thought said in the way I would say them, but I'm hearing it on tape or whatever it was, yeah.
So I oftentimes feel the same way about you.
Oh, thank you.
But I wonder what it feels like to have people to feel that way, because I'm clearly not the only one. You speak to a large portion of people like me who you are saying things like that they're thinking that they can't quite get out the way that you do. And do you ever think about that effect that you have on people, and how does it feel?
Well, first of all, it's really nice of you to say that. That's very kind. There is one weird thing about it, though, because, how can I say this? As a writer, the idea is that I'm doing something creative that's unique to me. That I'm expressing something that I need to, that there's something inside of me that I'm expressing, and I'm the only person who can do it. Like, when I write a book, people can like it or they can dislike it or whatever, the one thing I want them to feel like is that this could only have come from him. You're the only person who could have written this book or whatever. So when you have this thing where people feel as though like, oh, this person is kind of speaking for me, obviously that is good for the success of a book, because that's what, and some people feel like this really resonates with me. But then it also makes me think like, well, did I just type what everybody feels? did I just, is this like, what's delicious in the morning? Toast. People are like, this guy is me or whatever, it's like, so it is an interesting thing. Like, I like that you feel that. I like that you said that for sure. And yet another part of me is like, is this actually the opposite of my intention? It's sort of like the difference, like, you're a music guy. Like, we were both metal guys when we were young, like 80s metal people, right? And there was, at the time, real tension between, like, metal and punk. There was a real tension, And like Eddie Van Halen, what Eddie Van Halen did, it was like, I can't do that. No, I could be in my garage for 2 years. I can't do that. What you're doing is something different. The value of punk was that anyone can do it. 3 chords. You can do it too. What I'm doing, you can do. I think those are very ideological splits. And not just because I like metal, maybe just because I'm the person I am in the camp where I want to be like Eddie Van Halen, and yet part of me also realizes I'm much more like the Clash. Right. And that's too much of a compliment. Maybe like the Slits or whatever, like where it's like maybe what I'm doing is just like I was the lucky person who stumbled in this situation, that I get to be the person who types this and I'll make money doing it, and everybody else is like, I like this because he's me or whatever. And if that's the case, I guess I'm lucky, but it feels weird. Yeah.
Alex, I know we have to do Q&A. Can I have one more? Yeah. All right. So I stopped and I wrote this down when you wrote it because I'm sorry.
No, I'm not.
It reminded me of my dad. You wrote about your dad. He was a chronically depressed workaholic who was usually in a good mood, which when you read it, but also it makes sense. I guess the question is, could you expound on that? Could you, what does that mean?
Well, in one way, he literally had depression. I mean, that runs in my family, and he absolutely had it. And after he had a stroke when I was 8, it really became almost the center of his personality. Like, that happens when you have a stroke, I guess. I mean, it's like that he kind of almost lost his ability to have, I'm from North Dakota. The people in my life are very stoic growing up. Like, my mom was the most stoic person I think I ever knew. I mean, she loved me and I loved her, but she was not an emotional person. I think my dad aspired to that, but then he kind of lost the ability to do that. He was depressed. He was a workaholic, but he was a funny guy. He would make kind of dark jokes about things, about himself. He would never, I don't remember hanging out with my dad and feeling like this is a bummer, but yet he was often saying things that literally were sad,
Yeah.
But he would say it in a kind of a self-deprecating way. I mean, and it's interesting how, and this is probably true for everyone, if you have a good relationship with your parents, I was fortunate, I had a great relationship with my parents, that their qualities become, in your mind, positive qualities. So when I describe it in that way, that he was like a chronically depressed workaholic who was usually in a good mood, I see all those things as good. Now, I realize somebody else could read that and be like, that's mental illness. It's a fucked up thing or whatever, It's like that's not, we've kind of, in society, have sort of changed what we classify as mental illness and how willing we are to be like, it's no big deal. So it's like, or it's so normal that we're all just, I'm not really answering this question, but that's
wasn't really a question.
Yeah, I mean, that description of him, I got 6 brothers and sisters, and I'm curious, they just got the book yesterday or whatever. I had them, the publisher mail it. I'm really kind of curious what they're going to say about that particular section of the book, because, I don't often talk about my parents in my writing. I've written 13 books where I talk. A friend of mine once told me this. He's like, I don't think I know anybody who's ever talked about themselves so much without really telling other people anything important. Like, about me. Like in my first book at one point, like I list my salary or whatever. And he's like, it's crazy you did that, but that's also not that meaningful. Like, it's almost like you're stating a fact about your life as opposed to this thing. And it's probably true. It's probably an astute assumption by him. But I think that in a weird way, it's just like football does affect a deep part of me. I'm almost ashamed by it, how deep it is, kind of. And as a consequence, to work through some of those things, I had to write a little bit about things that I normally would have thought, well, that should just be me. It should just be in here, but it's how it had to be,
Do Q&A?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do Q&A. First, can we get a round of applause for Chuck and Spike? If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll come around with the mic. We're going to start right here.
Hi, Chuck.
Hi.
With thinking about the future of recorded media, movies, music, what do you think is going to be the future of those things given AI's influence and AI being incorporated into those things?
Are you talking about the future of what we've got in existence, the current kind of, or the content of the future?
No, more like what will recorded movies, music be from this point on?
Yes. Okay. Well, future is unwritten. I'm just guessing, but I do have thoughts on this. Right now, and as I look across the audience and I look at Spike and stuff, we're all kind of roughly in this same age, right? We're in this age where we can completely remember the old world, and yet we're completely kind of involved with this new world. And that's kind of a cool thing in a way. For a lot of people in this room, if you're between the ages of 45 and 60 or whatever, your experience with the internet is historically unique. That you can remember a time when it didn't exist at all and everything was one way, and now that's all it is. Now with AI, there's a similar thing, although it's happening much faster. Right now, for almost everyone in this room, if we read something that's made by AI, we would know instantly. We could tell instantly. It would look stilted and bad, and it would be like, but now to my son, he's a pretty smart 12-year-old. For him, he doesn't really differentiate. He knows there's a difference, but he almost prefers the AI version in a weird way for reasons that actually make sense. What I think is going to happen is that it will improve and get better, and you'll be able to do this. You'll be able to be like, I'd like to watch a movie with Harrison Ford and Marilyn Monroe. And I want it to be a thriller, but I want it to have a real kind of comedic undercurrent, and I want it to have a subtext where they talk a lot about reggae music. And I want it to be 2 hours and 14 minutes long. Actually, no, I want it to be 1 hour and 55 minutes long. I want it to sort of have some of the qualities of a Stanley Kubrick film, but I want it as if Stanley Kubrick was actually influenced by people who were born after him. Make it. And you'll get a version of that film. And now when I describe that in a way, some of you might be like, well, it almost seems like kind of utopia in a sense. In the same way that there was a time when if someone had told me in 8th grade, it's like, one day you'll be able to have every song that exists, and all you gotta do is listen to it. And I'd be like, of course that was better, It's not, but it sure seemed like it would be. But if that happens, what's interesting about that, if this reality I'm kind of describing occurs, what that means is every experience people have with art will be singular. You will be able to create the movie or the television show or the book or whatever you want specifically to you that will fulfill your needs exactly as you perceive them. So what it'll mean is everything you get will not necessarily be what you actually want, but what you believe you want, and those things are sometimes different. And also, it'll be unshared. And part of the purpose of art is to find kind of a collective connectivity with people we have nothing else in common with. That we all share certain feelings about a painting, even though I was from North Dakota and you were from wherever you're from, and somebody else might be from Italy. Like that's, in some ways, that's kind of what art is important. It's like it's ability to see yourself in things that are not you. So I do think what will probably happen is that as AI improves and gets to a point where it can actually create things that are essentially indistinguishable from things from the past, one, there'll be no more advancements in art, because we'll only use the past as a guide. And the other thing is that it will be kind of a further process of isolation. I mean, I get really into this idea of the slow cancellation of the future. I talk about it all the time. And it's this idea that we always thought the internet was going to be the ultimate accelerant of culture. And it kind of has worked in the opposite way. It seems to actually stagnate things. And you see this in lots of ways. When Pro Tools came out, the ability of people to say, like, make a record in their bedroom, and they can make it seem like they're, it can make it sound whatever they want, like, that was impossible. What do people want? Well, can I make this sound like it was recorded in Abbey Road? Or somebody makes a movie, and they're like, I can do anything now with digital film. Someone like Stanley Kubrick was like, okay, I have the limitations of physical media. How can I make 2001 look real? How can I show space? How can I show, early man or whatever, I have these limitations. I got to use lenses. I got to use all this lighting. Now you'd be able to go like, well, I want it to look like that. So I want it to look like a Stanley Kubrick movie. But that means that there'd be no sort of accidental innovation out of necessity. Like, these are the things I worried about. That, like, in some ways, the worst case scenario of AI would be that it's able to do art as well as we are. So the art we have now is the only art we have forever. Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming.
Oh, thank you. You too. Yeah.
I've been listening to The Rights to Ricky Sanchez for over 10 years, so the two of you being on stage together is awesome. Spike has introduced me to great movies, great albums, and introduced me to your work. So when he said that you were writing a book about football, I was super excited, and for you to be half hour down the road for me is fantastic. So with that in mind, I want to throw a question to you really about societal ethics that came up on the basketball podcast, which might sound a little odd.
Is this the plain one?
Yes.
Yeah, all right.
So since you brought it up, talking about the annoyances of flying, what are your thoughts on reclining in an airplane seat?
Well, obviously, if you're in business class or in first class, it's no problem at all, because it's in coach, it is pretty tight, especially on certain airlines. I think what you have to do is sort of look at the person behind you, because I think that does dictate something. Like, if it's an elderly person, don't do it. It's like they got enough problems. If a 6'8" guy is sitting back there, like, don't do it. If it is someone who just looks like that they're, sometimes you can just tell it's like this person is going to see this as an obstruction. I find that I try not to recline my seat in a way. I've kind of gotten into this thing. It's a weird term that they call raw dogging flights. If you don't know what this is when, like, you don't read a book, you don't listen to music, you don't watch the screen in front of you. Some people even add, don't drink water. I don't throw that one in there. But I find that there is a weird satisfaction from it, because that just doesn't happen in life anymore. Like, it just does not. I mean, there used to be times when you would wait in line at the post office and just stand there. People don't go to the post office now, but if they did, they'd all be on their fucking phone the whole time. And I say fucking there like it's some terrible thing. I do with this too, It's like, when this thing ends, I'm going to go do that, do the signing and stuff. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. I'm going to call a car. And before I get in the car, I'm going to be looking at my phone. Like, I can't even wait for that. So, what was the conclusion of the podcast?
Well, we never conclude anything. Yeah. There would be another episode of the podcast. We had one writer. We have a few people that write articles for us that theorized that the right thing to do is to ask the person behind you. And I said, that is for you, not for them, because you're putting them
absolutely
situation.
In some ways, that is almost a worse thing.
Yes,
because you're forcing them if they're polite, to both say yes and have the hardship. Because for them to say no, it really changes the relationship then. I mean, it would be very strange if you said to someone, it's like, hey, do you have what time it is? And they look at their watch and it's like, and they didn't tell you. Like, you'd be like, well, this now the rest of our lives are weird, It's like,
we got an email from some economist who ended up in an argument with another economist because he found his email address online, who tried to tell me that the reason that my theory was basically that the reason that the seats barely recline anyway, they only recline because they've always reclined. And airlines are afraid of making them not recline because they're afraid people will yell at them. And his point was, well, if it didn't make economic sense, they wouldn't do it. And I said, well, a lot of big companies make decisions that don't make good economic sense.
Because it's one of those things where it's not like I'm not going to take a flight now because the plane doesn't really.
Right.
I mean, like flying does suck and all that things, but sometimes I do think it's like they don't need to give me a Coke. It's not like I would not go on this airline because there's no Cokes, But they, I appreciate that they do,
Hey. Hello. Oh, okay. Thanks for coming out today. I was thinking about what you mentioned about kind of our shared experience and looking at the folks who are here. And, I'm one of those old-time sports fans that have been a fan of yours and Simmons and Spike and the podcast and all that. I was thinking about what are the sports that always kind of made me groove on? It's always been kind of the three, the pro basketball, the college basketball, and the baseball. So when I heard that you were writing this book, and I've been a fan of yours for a long time, I was like, I'm curious as to what was prompting you to make this kind of elevation of what I always thought was a little bit of a meathead sport, where there, it always kind of vexed the day. I look at when the games are, excuse me for interrupting you, but when they say like the AWS, that Amazon Web Services, and that, like, I think the data analytics don't apply as well to football as you mentioned. So I was curious as to what kind of motivated that.
In a total vacuum, like remove all aspects of history, professionalism, all these. If we're just talking about the game, basketball is my favorite sport. I think in some ways basketball is almost the purest distillation of a team sport for a lot of reasons. I was also a better basketball player, though, so I know that probably warps my perception of that. However, when I always wanted to do a book about football, about sports, but I knew it had to be football. I mean, it's like football is not just the most important sport in the country. It's more important than all the other sports. It's also incredibly strange that this thing that dominates the United States is really only in the United States. That has meaning too. And almost what you said is part of it. Like when you go like, I kind of associated this as kind of a meathead thing, and that actually was the kind of, I think the perception of football, certainly in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. If you see a movie from the 60s, it's like maybe the quarterback is the prom king or whatever, and every other guy on the team is an ox and a moron or whatever. And I think that is wrong. I think that actually the intellectual sophistication of football really surpasses all these other games. It doesn't seem that way because it involves guys running into each other at full speed and trying to put them in the hospital. It does seem to be a different thing. But, when you think of how a football play comes in, man, like there's a guy in the press box. He sends down the message to the sideline. That guy sends it in through a radio to the quarterback, who then looks at a wristband to unlock the Byzantine code and then tell the other 10 guys to go up in the line and then maybe change it again. Like, basketball is like aspires to jazz. That's a common thing, And it's not like, and I write this in the book, so I'm just kind of quoting it, but it's like, basketball aspires to jazz, but it's not like football aspires to anti-jazz or even to prog rock. Basketball aspires to jazz. Football aspires to petroleum engineering. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. One of the things I'm always interested in, so I haven't read the book yet. I'm noticing one of the themes is sort of football before football, football now, and football after football. one of the things I'm always interested in is the role that religion plays. Of course, Christianity in particular being a really dominant voice as sports are picking up, and there's a lot of controversy when football's first starting about its fitness for society among Christians. Then religion needs new PR, so we're going to adopt it. I mean, even sports betting now is pretty prevalent in churches, despite them taking a historical stance on betting. But I'm curious, if you're to project that out in the future, do you see a changing relationship between the relationship between American religion and sport?
Well, that's a really interesting question. It's actually a great question because Walter Camp, sort of the godfather of football, he wrote a book called Football in the late 19th century. That's why this book is called Football. I also thought it was interesting no one else did that for the whole 20th century, just named a book Football. But, one of his big things was the idea of a maybe you'll be aware of this, sort of a movement called muscular Christianity. And muscular Christianity is a form of Christianity that really amplifies the importance of physical fitness, the importance of discipline, all the things that we now kind of associate with the positive caricatures of football. It came from a religious movement, okay? I'd mentioned Friday Night Lights earlier. One thing that still blows my mind is in the first episode of Friday Night Lights, the quarterback gets paralyzed, and the entire team then takes a knee in the end zone and prays for him. When I saw that the first time, I was like, now the next scene is going to be someone claiming they're hypocrites or something. I'm so used to the secular nature of television basically saying that this is a negative thing. Then it never happens. And I was like, that's weird. They're just accepting that's part of it, which is really added to the realism. It is interesting that the number of evangelicals in football, professional football, is much greater than the world at large. Football is conservative coded. Okay, I'm guessing a lot of the people here buying this book don't see themselves as conservatives. They still love football. Maybe the only thing they like about conservative ideology is football. Maybe that's the one place that allows this to happen. So I don't really know if I can answer your question because it's hard to sort of project how sort of we're a less spiritual, less religious country than we were. And yet for the people where religion is part of their life, it kind of is now the singular part of their life. So there's this kind of asymmetrical growth where Christianity is now, very few people or less and less people go to church and all these things. Yet the people who do, it's almost like the only center of their life. I don't know how that plays out over time. It seems as though it's going to be almost like the perception of what we would consider a normal religious person now will be seen as very cultic. Somehow it will be almost like the idea that even you're willing to see spirituality in an organized way will be seen as a strange thing. That might already be the case for people in their 20s. I mean, obviously, I'm 53. I don't date anymore. I would be interested if this ever comes up, Because when I was dating in my 20s and 30s, sometimes it would kind of come up, and I even had a little shtick I would use. I would ask the woman, it's well, are you religious or whatever, and they would say something like, well, I was raised Catholic, but I'm not really Catholic anymore, or oh, my parents were real, Jewish. And I'm just, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm kind of that way. I'm a fallen away Amish person. It's I don't believe any of that, but I don't wear zippers, too showy. It's they always love that. Yeah, yeah.
Chuck, question to the right.
My writer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So over the last 10 or 15 years or so, it seems like the teams from North and South Dakota have been doing really, really well in the Division I AA or FCS or something like that.
They have.
I don't remember that being true before that. I'm just wondering, since you're from there and your community how has they reacted to that?
Well, you asked the right guy for that. So North Dakota State, the University of North Dakota, where I went to college, South Dakota State and USD, they were Division I programs. Or Division II programs until 1996 or 1997. So there was, major college football. There was what was then called 1AA, which was like, I'm trying to think of what would be like a lot of the Ivies and stuff, and like the Patriot League teams or whatever. And then they played Division II football. Those schools have all now moved up to FCS, which is now called the subdivision. And they are, like North Dakota State particularly, is the dominant team. You know, I think that they have won in the last 10 years. I think they have won the title 7 times or 6 times, you know. And they consistently, you know, they beat Kansas State one year. They beat Iowa State. They've beaten Iowa. They were supposed to play Oregon, and then the pandemic happened. But, like, I was very interested to see what was going to happen when that occurred. So now those schools have kind of become the dominant FCS programs, and the only programs that could really compete with them were James Madison and I'm trying to think of a few others, like Immaculate Word, and they also moved up to Division I. Now, North Dakota State, in many ways, should be a Division I program. I mean, they're as good as a Division I program. The issue is always the size of the stadium. It's in Fargo, right? So the maximum you could have in that stadium, I think, is like 16,000 or 17,000 people, and that is, or maybe it's 22,000, but it's not. It's seen as not enough to, you know. I really felt I wanted North Dakota State and probably South Dakota State as their partner to try to get into the Pac-12 when that was falling apart, or to get into the Mountain West, or even get into the Big Ten when it was expanding as it was. But it seems as though those schools have made this decision that it is better for them to just dominate at this smaller level than it is to move up. And I'm kind of afraid they might be right, because, you know, for NDSU, for example, it's like, the only way that season is viewed as successful is if they go undefeated and win the championship. If they have one loss and win the championship, it was an okay year. If they only make the playoffs, it's a failure. Fire the coach. And that's obviously not going to translate if they move up and they go 8-4 or 7-5 and stuff, you know. So that's what's happened, basically. It's like all the other programs like them have moved up, and they now are like the center of the FCS, you know.
Chuck, we've got a question on the balcony up to your left.
Okay.
Right up here. So I apologize if I ramble as I try to get my point across here, but, you know, with the way we're seeing ticket prices in all forms of sports media increasing and increasing, do you think there will come a breaking point where either the overall fan experience has changed and you've weeded out your average rabid fan, and then in turn, you know, something as small as home field advantage no longer exists because you don't have the people anymore?
We were kind of talking about this before the event. I in a sense, I think what you're saying has already happened. I mean, you know, because it's interesting when we say the average fan, there's also like this other meaning that we're not saying, which is that this is somebody who's probably lower middle class or middle class, right? We don't think of the average fan as being wealthy. We think of the average fan as either being like lower class, and that the only thing they have is sports, or they're like somebody who's like going to see an Eagles Cowboys game. That's the year for us. Like, that's for my kid, that's his Christmas present or whatever, you know. And that already seems to be like kind of getting phased out, right? That seems to be impossible. But at the same time, there's this weird thing that just makes no sense. We were talking about how, say, Taylor Swift, she plays 5 shows on her last tour in SoFi Stadium. On the last night, on the 5th night, the worst seat was $1,800. So that, how can there be that? Like, how can I look at the street and see people, you know, like a world where it seems like most people are barely getting by, and there are people who are like, oh yeah, it's like, hey, I got the worst seat possible. I had to pay $2,000 for it. You know, it's like so I don't really get it. I do think that one thing, you know, we talk about. It's very common talking about class disparity, right? If Bernie Sanders was here or whatever, we talk about class disparity. And what they're always talking about is like the millionaire class. You know, the millionaire class is here and everyone. But there's this other kind of, I think, maybe more practical class dichotomy, which is that there are some people who have 10 to 20 grand of disposable income a year. That's like they have that much money to spend on stuff that is in no way essential, and that kind of is the only people who are like season ticket holders now in a lot of ways. I mean, outside of the people who are super wealthy and they buy the courtside seats, or they have they're season ticket holders for the NFL. And I mean, do you know, like, what if you're a season ticket holder for the Eagles? What does it cost now?
Oh, I don't. Well, let's see. 9 games at a minimum of $500 for a pair.
And you also got to buy all the preseason games.
Yeah, you have to buy the preseason games as well.
Yeah.
So $7-8 grand.
Yeah.
Is a
So
minimum.
I mean, that's I bet it's higher. Like
Yeah.
there's probably someone in here will tell us, but it's like, so what? Someone's whisper.
It's actually less than that.
Oh, really?
I've been a Steelers season ticket holder for 54 years, and my tickets run about $1,500, and I sit in the second row.
Yeah.
Well, no, yeah. That is is there kind of a grandfather clause like? Because I got friends who had to stop being Viking fans. What?
I would have to pay whatever they charge me, so it's $1,500.
Well, that's great. That's actually great that they do that. That is, I know that's cheaper than most places. I know it because I had friends who used to be Viking ticket holders, and they had to stop. They were like, it's just too much, That's a good deal, But the Steelers are a great organization in that way. I'm guessing in a lot of ways. I mean, like the way the family runs that place. I mean, I think that if somebody said like, what is the model for a moral way to run a franchise? Like, they're as close as you're going to come in a $1 billion industry,
They made it too easy to sell your tickets now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
In the row in front of you, probably pay $1,500 a seat
Yeah.
to a game.
Are you tempted to sort of make that transfer? And like, I mean, I'm serious. It's like if you're. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the other thing the teams do is because this happened with Sixers tickets, which is one of the reasons I don't have them anymore, but they write into the contract that since they can monitor, since everything's digital now, and they know if you've sold them, if they determine that too many of your tickets have gone to resale, they can just revoke your season tickets.
Yeah.
And they never explicitly say, they create a system in which the only way you can afford season tickets is by selling a lot of them, but also warn you that if you sell too many of them, they will revoke them.
It is weird.
Yeah.
It is weird,
Same spot on the balcony.
Hello, fellas. Piggybacking a little bit off the airplane discussion and reclining seats.
Okay.
I noticed that I've been part of disputes at live concerts in the last couple of years, and I've seen it kind of boil up on the online discourse, standing up and kind of rocking out a little bit versus, kind of hanging out in your seat, enjoying it and watching it from there. And I see those discussions on Twitter and elsewhere get very heated and very divided into. And I don't know if you had, opinions on that.
Well, okay, for somebody who's, I worked at Spin Magazine, I was a rock critic for most of my career. I've gone to tons of shows. I never go to shows now, in part because I like records more than I like the live experience. I like football on TV more than I like football in the stadium. Like when I went to Steely Dan, they were playing all their records. They'd play like Asia in full. Nobody stood up at all. No, not one person at any time. And that was great. It was like in a theater. It's a little odd. It's like, if you're going to see, so you're going to see Guns N' Roses now, okay? On the one hand, it seems very weird to sit through a Guns N' Roses show. On the other hand, you are probably over the age of 40 or 45 years old. I mean, I don't, that's just, I often wished, and this is maybe other people feel this way. When I've tried to go to shows now and I got to stand the whole time, my hips hurt and all these things. I wish that it was in the round and we could walk around the stage. I kind of would maybe seem like we're in the holy city of Islam or whatever. But if I could walk around it, I would feel okay, and I would also get some exercise in it or whatever. What do you do if you go to a concert and the person next to you, they want to dance? Well, I mean, they paid the same thing you did. It's kind of weird to be like, well, you shouldn't be dancing here at this musical event, I think you kind of got to let them do it. I mean, you just got to let it happen. And it's like if it bothers you that much, then you probably shouldn't be there, because what you're really discussing are things that really only happen in amphitheaters or arena shows, right? If you go to a club show, you can either sit down or there's not that many. You can find a place. It's like, and that's the only place. If you're in a bar, like if you go to a jazz club or whatever, you're going to be able to experience that music in a way that you can't experience at home because But if you're at a stadium, if you're like where the Eagles play or whatever, and you're seeing whoever you're seeing there, you're already getting a completely degraded version of the music, right? Like there's just it wouldn't matter if it was the Beatles. I mean, the Beatles play Shade Stadium, like we can't hear ourselves, you can't expect music to be transmitted hundreds of feet from amplifiers that are as big as this, it's like that's not how it was meant. You wouldn't record a record. So in that situation, like it is the experience, and you have to let the person have the experience. It just is crazy to be like you're sitting 250 feet from the stage, and you're like, sit down, I can't see it. I can't see it if I have binoculars.
This will be our final question. Chuck, we're even further to the left on the other balcony. Pass the bell.
Hey, I was just wondering what your favorite position is on the football field, why, and then also if you played, what do you think you would be best at on the field? What position you play?
Okay, so I have sort of a classic story of the kid who wanted to be the quarterback, right? I wanted to play quarterback. And there were some things I was great at. Knowing the plays, knowing the audible system, describing plays and execution that I couldn't actually execute. I did not have a strong arm. I could run the option pretty well, but we weren't really an option team, so there was a limit to that. But I kept trying, and I kept trying, and I played 9-man football, so we played both ways. And I was a better defender. And then when I was a senior, I sort of finally accepted that I was not going to be the quarterback, and I moved to receiver, and it was a really good decision. I was an outside linebacker, kind of a hybrid outside linebacker, safety sort of, and I did like hitting. I liked it. I practiced hard. But then I became the punter out of necessity. We did not have a punter that year, and we just could not. We had a kind of a string of really great kickers at our school. Suddenly we had no punter, and it was just unknown who was going to do it. I knew that there would be an opening, so like the summer before, I spent the summer punting over our barn, and I became a pretty good punter. I think I averaged 42 yards a kick when I was a senior, and it's weird that I remember that, but I do remember that. Or maybe it was 36 yards a kick, I think. But it was surprising because I'd never punted before. So because of this, I have this weird affinity for punters and the idea of punting and sort of, I almost wrote an essay in this book just about the idea of the metaphor of punting, but I didn't. I suppose actually the position that I would have been best suited at is like probably now tight end, because when I was in high school I was 6'1". When I was a senior I was 6'1", 165. I looked like Chris Robinson, the Black Crows. Okay, now I'm 6'2", 235, which means that the version of me in high school is essentially walking around with like a bag of grain over his shoulder. Like I can't believe it. Like how many pounds heavier I am than the person I was as a senior. It's unbelievable to me. It just doesn't seem possible. But so now if I was actually this size, and if I could still move I suppose that's probably the position I would be best suited for. What was playing quarterback, and this is it kind of actually goes back to your question a little bit. Okay, so I've written 13 books. I was a journalist at newspapers and magazines. I helped write a 30-year retrospective story where we completely re-reported the Kent State shootings. The hardest thing I ever did in my life was try to play quarterback, and that's not an exaggeration. It was the most complicated thing, multiplied by the fact of the physicality of I always kind of, you took biology when you're in high school, and you have your biology book, and they show you the inside of the frog, and you see there's his heart, and there are all the things, you see the picture, and they're all different colors, and then you cut the frog open, and it's just brown, fucking, That's kind of what it is like, I felt. It's I just, to drop back and the pocket is immediately collapsing. You're supposed to read all these things, and when if it's like a 7-on-7 situation, I can read the safety or whatever. In an actual situation, I can't find him, and it's like, I can't even find the guy I'm supposed to read or play off of or whatever. And then, if everything goes perfect, I then have to deliver the ball 25 yards to a guy who's moving, and it's like the number of times, even in practice, that ran a play and it all worked, I feel like I remember every one. I'm serious. I feel like I remember every time that I threw a pass that was complete in the way that we intended. I feel I can remember them all. It's. I like it. It's hard. It's like you can't just. There are a lot of positions in football where you can just get by on athleticism. A running back. Actually, a running back is an important position where you probably have to have the least understanding. The play tells you what hole to go to. Sure, there's situations where you got to pass block and do all these things, but you can kind of get by on physicality. You can play nose guard or defensive tackle and just kind of get by on physicality. But playing quarterback wasn't that way. It wasn't that way at all. And I feel a bit of sympathy every time some quarterback who's not that good plays terrible, and people are like, we got to give this, the Doug Peterson or whatever the situation is, where a guy is or was it Nathan? Who am I thinking of? Who are the collection of quarterbacks that are consistently used as a great example of a terrible quarterback?
Well, it's always Trent Dilfer, even though he won the Super Bowl.
But Trent, he's considered the worst super successful quarterback, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying the guys who Yes. Oh, yes. There you go. Yes. That although he's kind of reinvented himself by being knowledgeable or whatever, but Garrett's a great Zach Wilson's a great example. Where so I watched that kid play at BYU, and I like him. I see he seems he's. I sort of like the style he plays. He's, and then he gets to the NFL and it just all kind of collapses. And then people talk about him like he's a troll or a troglodyte or something, or it's he shouldn't even exist. And it's it's embarrassing that this person, what was wrong with his parents? Why didn't they abort him or whatever? They have no idea of how far removed what he has to do, even from the other guys on the team. So I guess that's my answer. But I will say this. Hey, first of all, thanks a lot for Spike for doing this. It was really cool. And thanks, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I'm not lying when I say this. It's this always makes my head explode. The fact that you guys, you come here and you sit here, listen to me talk about nothing, and listen, look at me. It's say, I can't even tell you how flattering that is and how amazing it is and how I can't believe that my life turned out this way. So, thank you. I mean, I really mean it. Thank you.
Thank you again to Spike Eskin. Thanks to Chuck. The book is Football. It's out now. We have copies available for purchase up at the cafe. We're going to have a personalization and signing line with Chuck over in our Rare Books building. Go out the door to the left. You'll see the line. And we'll get started with that shortly. Thanks for coming out, everyone. Have a good night.
Okay. That's a complicated question. That will be explained that way. That's a very complicated question.
Sorry.